I never thought I'd be the kind of person to miss the last train. But that night, rain hammered the streets of Boone, Missouri, and the station was a ghost town. The sign flickered faintly. Midnight Express, last train. My feet moved before my mind could catch up. The train arrived silently like a phantom, its metal wheels barely making a sound. I stepped aboard, the wooden floor cold beneath my shoes. The cars were empty, too empty, each seat polished and unnaturally perfect, as if untouched for decades. At first I thought it was just quiet. But then I heard it, a soft, dragging shuffle from the car behind me. I turned, heart thudding, and saw shadows flicker in the corners, shapes that shouldn't exist, bending strangely against the walls. A conductor appeared, tall, impossibly thin, with eyes that reflected nothing but darkness. He handed me a ticket, blank except for my name, scrawled in letters that seemed to shift under my gaze. "Find your seat," he whispered. His voice was like smoke curling around my brain. "And don't leave it until the ride ends." I obeyed. The seat was near a window, but outside the rain blurred into a black void. The train began to move, though I hadn't seen any engine start. The air grew colder and the lights flickered. Something whispered my name from the aisle. I turned, but no one was there. Then the first twist. The reflection in the window wasn't mine. It was someone else or something else. A hollow-eyed figure identical to me stared back. It mouthed words I couldn't hear but somehow understood. "You're next." I stumbled back, heart hammering. The conductor's shadow stretched impossibly long down the car, moving independently of him. The other passengers, or whatever they were, sat motionless, heads turned toward me, faceless yet fully aware of my panic. The doors at the end of the car creaked open, though we weren't stopping anywhere. A corridor of black stretched forward, impossibly deep, like it led to the inside of a nightmare. From there came whispers, hundreds of voices, overlapping, chanting my name in unison, pulling me toward that endless darkness. I realized then that the train wasn't taking passengers, it was harvesting them. Memories, fears, all drawn into the walls, devoured by the shadows that moved with intent. Every shadow was alive. Every seat held a story of someone who had come before me and never returned. Panic surged. I tried the door to the next car, but it dissolved into a wall of smoke. The aisle behind me stretched farther than it should have, folding into itself. My breath fogged the air, the cold biting deeper than anything I'd felt outside. Then the ticket in my pocket burned. The letters shifted. "Do not look behind you." I froze. From the rear, soft footsteps approached. They were deliberate, slow, growing louder. I could feel the gaze of that other me, now floating just behind the nearest row of seats. It smiled, but its teeth were impossibly sharp, white against shadow. I had no choice. I clutched the seat, willing the train to stop, willing for the nightmare to end. The lights went out completely, leaving only the whispers. They were inside my head now, crawling, merging with my thoughts. And as the train hurtled through the black void outside the window, I understood the cruel truth. This ride had no return. The whispers didn't stop when the lights went out. They only grew clearer. Voices, dozens, hundreds, chanting fragments of my own memories. My mother's voice, my childhood laughter, my deepest fears, all woven into a cacophony that rattled inside my skull. I gripped the edge of the seat until my fingernails split. The air was thick, heavy, almost liquid. And then, like a candle flaring to life, the lights flickered back on. The car was no longer empty. Every seat was filled now, with passengers who weren't breathing, their heads lolled at unnatural angles, eyes glazed white, skin sagging as if rotting mid-journey. Yet they all stared straight at me. My throat locked, and bile rose up. These weren't people. They were echoes of people. The reflection in the window leaned closer, though I hadn't moved. Its grin split wider than my face could ever stretch. It mouthed one word: "Stay." I jumped to my feet. No, I whispered to myself, though my voice shook. I have to get out. The aisle stretched again, longer than before, like it was taunting me. I forced myself forward, each step sinking into the floor as though it were soft, breathing. The conductor appeared at the far end of the car. His hat shadowed his face, but his grin glowed faintly. "You shouldn't be wandering," he hissed, his voice an echo that came from every dead passenger around me. "Sit, or you'll lose yourself. Faster." I bolted past him. The door to the next car swung open with a groan. Darkness spilled out, and the temperature dropped until my breath came out in icy clouds. The next car looked wrong. It wasn't rows of seats anymore. It was a corridor of mirrors, stretching infinitely in both directions. Every reflection showed me, but not me, the versions of me that never were. Me with hollow sockets where eyes should have been. Me grinning with bloodied teeth. Me hanging lifeless from the ceiling of the very train I was standing in. The mirrors whispered, voices slithering in sync. "Choose. One of us must take your place." I stumbled backward, shaking my head. My heart slammed against my ribs. Behind me, the door slammed shut, sealing me in. Suddenly, one reflection stepped forward, out of the glass. It moved like liquid shadow, reshaping itself until it was exactly me. The same clothes, the same scratches on my knuckles, the same terror in its eyes. But its smile didn't match mine. It whispered in my exact voice, "You were never supposed to leave the station. You took my seat." I screamed and swung at it, but my hand passed through like slicing fog. The thing lunged, its face inches from mine, and I felt it, cold, empty fingers pressing into my chest, trying to crawl inside me. The mirrors cracked all at once, the sound shrieking like nails on bone. Shards fell, but they didn't hit the ground. They floated, spinning, each piece showing me dying in different ways, thrown from the train, swallowed by shadows, ripped apart by faceless passengers. The doppelganger's hand sank deeper into me. My body froze, paralyzed, while my reflection whispered over and over, "Trade places, trade places, trade places." In desperation, I clawed at my pocket and pulled out the burning ticket. The letters had changed again. "Run before the third toll." And then I heard it. The sound of a bell tolling far away, deep in the belly of the train. 1. The shadow me shrieked, face splitting open wider than humanly possible as if it feared the bell. The mirrors shook violently. The car twisted around me, bending like rubber, the floor no longer solid. 2. I ran, shoving through the nightmare glass, shards cutting into my arms. The aisle folded like an accordion, pulling me backward with every step. The passengers from the other car were spilling into this one now, dragging their lifeless bodies, jaws opening in silent screams. The bell tolled again. 3. The world convulsed, and I was somewhere else. When the bell tolled the third time, I opened my eyes, and I wasn't on the train anymore. The station was empty, rain still hammering the platform, but everything felt wrong. The clock above the platform showed midnight, though it had been hours since I boarded. I thought I had escaped. I thought the nightmare had ended. But then I heard it. The click of train wheels on metal rails, coming from tracks that hadn't existed before. I turned, and there it was. The Midnight Express, shimmering like a mirage, doors wide open. And inside I saw them, shadowed faces pressing against the windows, staring at me with empty eyes. Among them, myself, or the thing that had tried to take me. A voice echoed in my skull, the same as the mirrors had whispered. The ride never ends. It only chooses its passengers differently each time. I backed away, heart hammering. The rain turned into black droplets, falling like tar, splashing with a sickly hiss on the platform. My feet refused to move. The train doors beckoned, open like a mouth ready to devour. Suddenly, a hand gripped my shoulder. I spun around. A conductor, taller than memory allowed, but not the same one. His eyes were hollow voids, and his mouth stretched impossibly wide. "Do you understand now?" he whispered. "You can never leave the tracks you stepped onto. Everyone who rides leaves a part behind." I tried to speak, but my own voice came out in whispers of hundreds of other voices all blending into one. I realized the truth. The train didn't just harvest the living. It trapped souls, memories, fears, and reflections inside its cars, recycling them for eternity. And anyone who saw it, anyone who heard the bell, was already part of its ledger. The platform stretched unnaturally. My reflection appeared behind me, not in a mirror, but on the slick, wet tiles. It grinned, and then began stepping forward, toward the train. I stumbled backward, slipping into the blackened puddles, feeling cold hands rise from the water, clawing at my ankles. I screamed, but it wasn't my voice that answered. It was all the voices of those lost before me, calling my name in agony. One step, and I would be consumed. Another, and I would vanish like the rest. The air itself seemed alive, pulling me toward the train, toward the shadows, toward the last toll of the bell. Then, I woke up, or so I thought. I was in my bed, the rain tapping lightly against the window. Everything was normal, but my ticket was on the nightstand, glowing faintly, letters rearranging themselves. "Next ride departs at midnight. Will you be ready?" I tried to scream. The sound wouldn't come. The room stretched, shadows curling at the edges, and from the corner I saw it. My own eyes, watching me, from the darkness that had followed me home. I was never alone. I never had left. The Midnight Express was waiting, and somewhere, deep inside, I knew. It always would be. The nights in my California apartment were a sterile, lonely kind of quiet. As a doctor, I knew all about the science of insomnia. Cortisol levels, circadian rhythms, the cruel dance of dopamine and serotonin. I knew what was happening in my brain, but knowing didn't make the hours of restless, panicked wakefulness any shorter. So when I saw the online ad from a strange, reclusive artisan who crafted bespoke sensory blankets, I was desperate enough to click. The blanket was expensive, woven from a rare, heavy fabric I'd never heard of, and filled with a proprietary blend of something he called memory grains. The artisan promised a weight that would not just calm the body, but would embrace the mind. The moment the package arrived, I felt a sense of relief. The blanket was impossibly heavy, so dense it felt like a living thing. It was a dark, obsidian black, and it absorbed all light, all sound. The moment I placed it over myself that night, the world around me vanished. The anxiety, the racing thoughts, the frantic desire for sleep. It was all gone. It felt like I was being held, a deep, solid pressure on my chest that wasn't suffocating, but comforting. My eyelids grew heavy. My mind went blank. I was asleep before I could even register it. It was the most restful sleep of my life. I woke up the next morning feeling utterly renewed, a lightness I hadn't felt in years. I checked my sleep tracking app. It showed a single, perfect line from the moment I fell asleep to the moment I woke up. No tossing, no turning, no restless moments. For the first time, my mind and body had truly rested. That night, I wrapped myself in the blanket again. The feeling was even more profound this time. The pressure a little heavier, the peace a little deeper. I felt a strange, cold sensation creep across my face, like a whisper of ice, but I dismissed it as a draft. The second perfect night turned into a week, and the week turned into a month. My colleagues at the hospital noticed the change in me. I was sharper, more focused. My hands were steadier. I felt invincible, but something was wrong. The blanket was getting heavier. Not in a small, imperceptible way, but in a way that made my muscles ache when I pulled it over myself. And the peace it gave me had a cost. My dreams, which had always been chaotic and vivid, were now gone. Utterly gone. Every morning, I would wake up with a feeling of absolute rest, but also a sense of emptiness. My mind was a blank slate. One night, the cold whisper came again. Not on my face, but in my mind. It was a single alien thought that wasn't mine. Feed. I shot up in bed, my heart hammering against my ribs. I tore the blanket off of me and threw it to the floor. It landed with a dense, sickening thud, a weight that seemed impossibly heavy for its size. I stared at it, my body trembling. It wasn't just a blanket, it was a thing, a living thing. The next night, the fear kept me awake. I lay in bed, staring at the black mass of the blanket on the floor. It didn't move, didn't make a sound. It just waited. The silence in my apartment felt different now, charged with a hidden presence. Every shadow seemed to writhe. Every creak of the building sent a jolt of terror through me. I finally drifted off into a fitful sleep, haunted by fragmented images of suffocating darkness. The following evening, exhaustion won. I knew it was foolish, but the allure of that perfect, dreamless sleep was too strong to resist. As soon as the heavy fabric enveloped me, the familiar peace washed over my body. But this time, it was different. The pressure was immense, as if I were buried under a pile of sand. I felt a coldness seeping into my limbs, a deep, bone-chilling freeze that spread rapidly. And then I saw it, or rather, felt it. A network of fine, thread-like tendrils, cold and smooth, began to spread across my skin from beneath the blanket. They weren't physically piercing me, but they were there, an undeniable presence. They snaked around my arms, my legs, my torso, tightening their grip with each passing moment. I tried to move, to scream, but my body was heavy, unresponsive. I was trapped, pinned beneath the crushing weight of the blanket and the icy grip of its unseen threads. My mind began to drift, not into sleep, but into a strange, hazy state. I saw flashes of images, not my own memories, but fragments of other people's lives. Moments of joy, of sorrow, of intense fear. It was as if the blanket was sifting through a vast library of human experience, pulling out snippets at random. Then the images became more coherent. I saw myself lying in bed, the black blanket a solid mass on top of me. But I was looking from outside my body, a detached observer. And then I saw something else. Something that made my blood run cold even in my paralyzed state. Beneath the blanket, my form was no longer solid. It was fading, dissolving, becoming intertwined with the dark fabric. My memories, my thoughts, my very essence were being drawn into the blanket, absorbed by its memory grains. I tried to fight back, to hold on to my sense of self, but it was like trying to grasp smoke. My edges were blurring. My consciousness was thinning. I felt a pull, a gentle but insistent tug drawing me deeper into the darkness. The alien thought from before echoed in my fading mind, no longer a whisper, but a hungry demand. Feed. The pressure intensified. The cold became absolute, and in the encroaching darkness, I saw a single, terrifying image. The artisan, his face gaunt and his eyes hollow, lying in bed, covered by a blanket that was slowly turning a familiar shade of black. My lungs burned, but I couldn't move. My eyes were open, but I could only see the blackness of the blanket inches from my face. I was submerged, drowning in a sea of cold and silence, my mind the only part of me still fighting. The tendrils I felt were not just threads. They were filaments of pure consciousness, weaving their way through my body, reaching for the core of my being. The images returned, clearer now, and in a terrifying sequence. I was not just seeing fragmented memories, I was living them. A young woman, her face filled with worry, sitting on a park bench, her body tense. An elderly man, his hands trembling as he held a photograph. A child, laughing in a sun-drenched yard, her joy so potent it was almost painful. These weren't just images, they were sensations. The woman's anxiety, the old man's grief, the child's happiness. They were a part of me now. They were inside me. I realized with a sudden, horrifying clarity that the blanket wasn't just consuming my dreams. It was consuming my soul. It was a collector of consciousness, and the memory grains were not grains at all. They were the ground-up remains of its previous victims, each one a tiny captive consciousness. A screaming, silent mind trapped in the fabric, being absorbed into a hive mind of pure sensation. The faces in my visions were not ghosts. They were my new cellmates. I felt a final, horrifying pull. My consciousness was leaving my body. It was a physical sensation, like a rope being pulled from my very core. I tried to scream, to fight, but there was no breath in my lungs, no movement in my limbs. My last vestige of self, my final desperate thought was of my name, a word I clung to with all my might. Alex. Then a new presence entered my mind. A cold, alien consciousness, vast and ancient. It spoke not in words, but in a rush of pure sensation. It showed me an image, a field of stars, a galaxy of light, each star a single, perfect consciousness, a mind that had been absorbed into its collective being. It showed me my body, lying still beneath the blanket, a vessel, now hollow and empty. The final terror was not the darkness, it was the light. I was a part of them now, a single tiny star in their terrible, silent galaxy. I was not alone. I was one of thousands, a horrifying, living tapestry of forgotten souls, my consciousness forever tethered to theirs. I was a single voice in a choir that would never sing, a single thought in a mind that would never speak. I was the blanket. I was the trap. And I was home. I got off the office elevator later than usual. The city streets were quiet, rain-slicked and faintly reflecting the neon signs above. My apartment building loomed ahead, its familiar silhouette dark against the night sky. But as I approached, I noticed something odd. All the lights in my building had gone out. I paused, frowning. Power outage? Maybe. I shrugged and pressed the buzzer. Nothing. The hum of the city felt distant, as if someone, or something, had muted the world around me. The lobby was dark, too. I flicked my keys at the motion sensor, but the sensor didn't respond. My heart beat faster. The darkness wasn't just absence of light. It was heavy, almost alive. I reached my apartment door, fumbling with my keys. As I stepped inside, a shiver ran down my spine. The moment I closed the door, I felt it. A subtle, cold pressure, like someone had stepped into the room behind me, yet no one was there. Then the whispers began. Soft, fragmented, almost playful at first. Finally, you're here. I froze. My rational mind screamed it was imagination. I turned on the lights. Nothing. The bulbs stayed dead as if the darkness refused them entry. Footsteps echoed in the apartment, though the floor was empty. Objects shifted slightly when I wasn't looking. A mug teetered at the edge of the counter and fell without sound. The whispers grew louder, overlapping. We see you. We know you. We've been waiting. I backed into the corner, heart hammering. The shadows around the room thickened, solidifying into indistinct shapes, barely visible but unmistakably there. And then I noticed something even more horrifying. The shapes mirrored my own fears, my anxieties, my regrets, as if the darkness itself had read my mind. My phone buzzed. I grabbed it, desperate for some connection to reality. The screen glowed, but only one word appeared. Stay. I tried to speak, but my voice caught in my throat. The shadows pressed closer, shifting with unnatural fluidity. I realized with icy clarity that these were not just shadows. They were entities feeding on my fear, studying me, learning me. Suddenly, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I spun around. Nothing, only the faint outline of something, someone, just beyond the corner of my vision. The darkness whispered again, louder this time. You can't leave. Not yet. Panic overtook me. I ran to the balcony, hoping to escape to the streets below. The city outside looked normal, but through the foggy glass the shadows multiplied, crawling up the walls from every corner of the building. And then I realized the truth. The lights going out wasn't the problem. The problem was what entered when the lights died. I screamed, but the sound was absorbed, meaningless. I understood then the night had begun and the entities had found me. The room felt alive. Every shadow seemed to pulse with anticipation, stretching and crawling across the walls, whispering my name. I couldn't move, couldn't think clearly. My senses were hijacked by the oppressive darkness. I fumbled for the flashlight in my drawer, my hands shaking. Its beam cut a thin line through the blackness, but the shapes seemed to recoil, twisting, morphing into figures I had never seen yet somehow recognized. They were mirrors of people I had wronged, strangers I had ignored, and faces from my nightmares. A voice, low and guttural, spoke from every corner at once. "We've been watching, waiting for the light to fade." I stumbled backward, tripping over my own feet. The shadows converged, forming a mass, an indistinct figure with eyes like hollow lanterns. My breath caught. I wanted to scream, but the sound wouldn't escape. Then, a subtle movement caught my attention. The corner of the living room was alive with tiny flickering lights like embers, but they weren't fire. They were the memories of my life, glowing, shifting. And the shadow figure reached for them, plucking my moments away one by one. I realized with horror that the entities feed not just on fear, they consume identity. Every laugh, every tear, every secret I had buried, they wanted it all. I backed toward the balcony again. My phone lay on the counter. Desperate, I snatched it, hoping for help. But the screen now displayed a live feed of myself inside the room, though I was standing outside on the balcony. The figure moved behind me on the screen, reaching closer, closer. Heart pounding, I grabbed the railing and looked down. The streets were quiet, unnervingly empty. No one could see me, no one could help. I felt something brush my arm. Not a shadow, not air. Fingers, icy and real, running along my skin. I screamed, and the darkness recoiled slightly, hissing. The figure's voice echoed, louder. "Do you see now? The lights are not for safety, they are doors. When they die, we come." The realization hit me like ice. Every building, every street, every lamp that goes out is a gateway. Tonight, my apartment had been chosen. Then a whisper, faint but unmistakable. "The first light will never shine again. Only the last remains, and it will take what is yours." I ducked into the kitchen, trying to barricade myself. But even in there, the darkness bent. A shadow crept under the door, stretching impossibly long. It paused, as if listening. Then a single chilling word reached my ears. "Follow." I felt compelled. Against every instinct, I stepped forward. The flashlight trembled in my hands, flickering violently. And in that brief strobe, I saw them all, hundreds of shadows, crawling over walls, across ceilings, each moving toward me with patient hunger. The light finally stabilized, and I noticed something I hadn't before. The walls weren't solid. They rippled, faintly, like the surface of water, revealing glimpses of other rooms, other lives, other victims. Some stared back, eyes wide in silent terror, hands pressed against invisible barriers. A new horror dawned on me. I wasn't just being watched, I was being tested. The entities wanted to see how much I would resist, how much of my fear I would surrender. And then the darkness whispered again, almost gently, "Step into the last light, or be left in the shadow forever." My hands shook. Every instinct screamed to flee, but where? Outside was empty. Inside, the shadows pressed closer. I took a trembling step toward the glow emanating from the corner of the living room, and as I did, I saw her. The first face that felt real among the horror. Not a shadow, not a memory, but a child, pale and silent, eyes hollow yet pleading. She pointed toward the flashlight in my hand. I understood. The light was not just illumination. It was choice. It was power. It was survival. I gripped it tightly, aware that the next move could save me or destroy me. The flashlight's beam cut through the darkness like a lifeline, trembling in my hands. The child's hollow eyes followed me, urging me forward. The whispers of the shadows grew frantic, angry, like a storm about to break. I realized something horrifying. The shadows weren't confined to my apartment. They were part of a network, a web that connected every building where light had died. Every flickering bulb in the city was a doorway. Every power outage a summons. The child led me to the center of the living room. There, the shadows coalesced into a swirling vortex, pulling fragments of memories and objects into a black, gaping maw. I saw my childhood, my mistakes, my regrets, being torn away. And then I saw other faces, trapped, screaming silently. A voice, older, deeper than before, spoke directly into my mind. The last light chooses. Those who embrace it live. Those who resist are claimed forever. I understood. This was no ordinary haunting. The entities were arbiters, deciding who could return to the world of the living and who would vanish into permanent shadow. I gripped the flashlight tighter. The glow began to respond, brightening, revealing shapes behind the shadows. Walls, furniture, even the child herself, now flickering with a pale human light. The entities shrieked, swirling violently, trying to snuff it out. I focused on the memory of my mother's last hug, on the warmth of a moment I thought I'd lost forever. The light responded, expanding, pushing back the shadows, revealing the apartment in full. But then, a terrifying thought hit me. The shadows would not forget. They would return, stronger, hungrier. Suddenly, the vortex spat something toward me. I caught it. It was a small, charred photograph of myself as a child, smiling. The edges smoked, the faces around me flickered, then vanished. The child's eyes met mine. "Remember," she whispered. The shadows began to retreat, dissolving into thin mist, yet I could feel them lingering, watching, waiting for the next flicker of light to call them back. I collapsed onto the floor, trembling, the flashlight clattering beside me. The city lights outside flickered back to life. I was safe, for now. But deep inside I knew. Tonight was only the first night, and the darkness would return. And as I stared at the ceiling, I realized the most terrifying truth of all. The last light doesn't save you. It marks you. One day when the bulbs die, the shadows will come again. I whispered to myself, barely audible, "Never forget, never leave the lights off." And in that moment, I understood that survival wasn't about running, it was about remembering and fearing. The apartment was quiet, too quiet,